Alright everyone, yeah, we're going to look at Harmony, the Fall of Reverie, my first impressions on it. So it's not a review as such, it's just me going over basically what I feel about the game after about an hour or so of play or whatever. You've probably seen my first part of my gameplay playthrough, what have you, at some point somewhere on the channel, or I might have linked to it, you never know, but yes. So what's it about? Well, basically, the game wastes no time in getting you involved in just what the story is, and it's quite ridiculous to start with, to be honest with you. You literally just thrown into the deep end, no idea what's going on, and it seems that basically, this necklace that belonged to your mother, your mum's disappeared, and this necklace has been left behind. You touch the necklace, and then you essentially become Harmony, this sort of an aspiration essentially, and there's various aspirations, and you're one of them, and you're the link between the our world, or what it appears to be our world, and the world of the aspirations, basically. And our world is called Brittle, and I think the other world of the aspiration is called Reverie, I believe, or at least I'm sure I don't know if it's the place or the world or both, I'm not sure, but either way, that's the gist of it. And it just wastes no time in actually all this happening. So you're in a regular world, it looks great, you've got this beautiful, lovely animation, lovely visuals. It's a sort of visual novel style game, by the way. There's no sort of action as such. You're basically presented with generally still visuals, but occasionally some things are animated, such as characters when they speak and things, but they're usually sort of done in like a sort of profile style where you just see the character, sort of like as if it's like a sort of voice box or a text box with the character that you would get in like RPGs and things, where it's like separate from the real world, and it's just done in a little snippet style with a portrait of them, but this portrait moves as such, if you know what I mean. So yeah, so that's the gist of it, really. That's the kind of the basic gist of the game. You kind of as I say, just essentially got this fantastical plot where you're thrown in the deep end. All of a sudden, this all happens within literally about 10 seconds of starting the game, almost, or it feels that way. And as I said before, all this crazy stuff has gone on. You're this link between the worlds, this Harmony. Your real name's, I don't know, I forgot what your real name is now, Pippa or something like that. I think it's Holly or something like that. I'm not sure. I can't quite recall now. It doesn't really matter. You've got a real name. Now, I would say it's an interesting game. It's interesting. I mean, it starts off a bit too crazy where you think, what on earth is going? This is ridiculous. You're presented with, one of the other aspirations, and these aspirations are basically things like what seems to be like power, truth, stuff like that. They've got these kind of things. And one of them is this little girl who's, well, not quite little, but this girl who's sort of looks like some kind of cyberpunk reject, with a with a sort of Starbucks in hand or something like that, sucking a lollipop or something. What on earth is this going on here? It's just a bit wacky. She explains roughly what's going on, and it's a bit like that, really. It's a bit crazy. And what it turns out is the game is basically just a decision tree. It's made by Don't Nod, people who did the original Life is Strange, and I think it might have been the sequel, Life is Strange 2, or one of the other ones. Anyway, and they're quite basically, it's all about they've taken the decision part of Life is Strange and just implemented that as this game. So what happens is you have like essentially a decision tree per level as such. It's per chapter, I guess, and you basically can see roughly the outcome where you want to get to, and there's various nodes along the way. Sometimes some of these are technically hidden as to what they contain, but you can see the path, and you might be able to see some of the criteria that's required to open that path or access that path. And that's kind of how it will be, really. So, but in order to do these paths, sometimes you've got to please certain aspirations, some of the characters. So, for instance, one of them, truth or something like that, you might need to go down a certain route to get a truth token or whatever. And by which I mean you make a decision that aspiration approves of, and you then get essentially a token for that aspiration. And then later on in the chapter, there might be a path that you need this token and you have to spend it, and these tokens don't carry forward between chapters or what have you, so you have to spend them on this one. So you can't build up a relationship over the game. Well, I guess you can technically, but you don't keep the tokens over the different chapters. So yeah, so that's how you spend them, really. So quite an interesting one. That's quite a good concept, and it's made quite good because of the fact that in lots of these games, it can be quite difficult sometimes to do the wrong thing. Like you'll sort of, you think, oh, I want to be a horrible person, or I don't want to do what's clearly right for this person, But you also have the fact that you might not want to please certain aspirations. So, for instance, to do the right thing might involve choosing an aspiration you don't actually like, and things like that. That seems to be the way anyway. So it's quite an interesting one like that for that from that point of view. So it's not always clear cut. So just doing the right thing doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the right thing. You might be the aspiration you're supporting to do the right thing. So let's say by helping a friend of yours get confidence to apply for a job or something. That's just an example. You might actually be supporting an aspiration you don't like. So it adds a bit of difference to your choices there. It's not just a binary choice as such. There's actually there's a bit more meaning behind your choice as well. There's a lot of thought about it. And also I found that it was quite interesting because of the fact that all the dialogues, even though it's a crazy sort of start to the game, all this stuff, you're thrown in the deep end, like I said, to this weird story, but it's actually quite, all the dialogue so far, at least anyway, so it's first impressions, makes a kind of sense. When something's told to you and you think, oh, that implies this, it then reinforces that, and the implications of that conversation are not imagined, actually turn out to be the case. And it's quite good that, and I've had that quite several times, I'll say at the start of the game at least, not for the whole thing. I'm not sure if it will continue on, but it seems to imply that it will. So it's quite an interesting one where, as I say, the dialogue reflects reality as far as the what you'd expect the implications of the dialogue to be. So if someone says, oh, I don't know, it tells you some information, implies something, it then turns out that what they implied was the case. And that happens quite a few times, and it's quite interesting and quite, I think quite clever, that. And I feel like the dialogue, while the story might be fantastical and a bit over the top from when you get there at the start, it kind of works in its own world, and it's actually quite interesting, really. Yeah. So from that, basically, as I say, you're one of the aspirations yourself, or sort of. You're the link between the two worlds, the world of the aspirations and the world of people. The world of people is called brittle. They sort of mention this at the start. The first aspiration you meet keeps going about this brittle thing. You don't know what on earth she's talking about. But then it turns out to be the case that brittle is our world. Clearly it has to have some kind of name like that. And as I say, Reverie, as far as I know, is the aspirations world. If there's another name for it or whatever, but that seems to be the thing. And basically, you're the one that sort of balances it out, harmony, so it makes sense. You're the one that kind of is meant to keep things going. So basically, the aspirations seem to have an agenda, really, because they feed off of this life force or this energy. I forgot what it's called. Gregorio or something like that. I'm not sure. It's got some kind of weird name. Egrego. It's got I can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, whatever it's called. This stuff, and it's got some based on real life, I imagine. I don't think they've just made it up. It's probably some kind of Greek mythology energy source type thing or something. But basically, this is extracted, it seems, from brittle, the real world, and Reverie needs it to survive, and it's manifested by this blue heart. There's literally a blue heart, and it's explained to you in the first 5 minutes, as I say, where things are just, like, what on earth is going on? But that's the gist of it. And you're meant to be, so you exist on the real world, this brittle world. I guess it might be actually brittle, I'm not sure, but okay. You exist there as, Poppy or whatever your name is, Pam. And also, you exist in the Reverie world as Harmony. So you're the one that's basically trying to keep it. And it turns out, by the looks of it, that your mum was Harmony before. You can kind of work that out. That's one thing that you kind of work out. It's quite clear. It might seem obvious, but because your mum's disappeared, you got this necklace that transported you to this world. It was quite, you got the impression, well, hang on a sec, was my mum Harmony? And does that mean she didn't do a good job? Because you get there and everything's going, you're running out of this egregor or whatever it's called, substance, Reverie's going to pot. It turns out that your mum as Harmony didn't do a good job, and but before you're told that, you get it, you work that out. That's one example of what I was saying before, where the dialogue implies things, and those implications generally turn out to be the case. And I thought that was quite good, really. So it doesn't spell things out to you. Now, it's a visual novel, so there's no action or whatever. Now, the voices are generally actually sort of have actual voice actors, but the internal monologue that the character has for some reason isn't narrated, which is a bit of a shame, although obviously your main character, when she speaks, is narrated, so maybe it's just to differentiate between that. But of course they do that in other games where they give it like an effect to imply that it's someone's voice, someone's inner monologue, and I think they could have done that here, and I don't know why they've not done that, really. I guess it's because it's loads of text, but it would have been nice if they did that. But I do quite like the fact that it's got like a codex where you can view everything, and it's completely empty to start with, but it fills up gradually. So as soon as you discover something, it says you discovered something, you can hit a button to view the codex. And generally, if you do that, you can keep on top of it, and it's quite a good way of doing it, really. It actually works quite well because it's quite concise. It tells you just what you need to know. You can get enough from it, and if you just keep on top of it that way and read every new entry, there's not much each time. It's actually just a small snippet, and it means you're able to keep on top of it and know what's going on basically. And it works quite well actually. I was quite impressed with that. Yeah, so generally it's not too bad really. I think it seems to be quite good. So as I say, the whole gist of the game is basically you're presented with a decision tree, and you choose where to go, and based on what you want to achieve, but also what aspirations you want to please, and it gets more and more complicated, and you can basically see a gist of where you want to go, and you can plan how to get there. But there's some things that are hidden away, as in what the effects of your decisions are, things like this. But it's, as I say, made further complicated by the fact that you've got to please certain aspirations or displease them, presumably, to make certain choices. So it's not just picking the right thing; it's also fitting into the agenda of the aspirations, and those may, not sure yet, of course, but those may not be necessarily positive agendas. Might be something a bit awry there. So that does work well. It's quite an interesting one. I quite like the I think it's quite a good. It seems quite a good game, despite the fact it starts off seemingly totally bonkers. If you just get past it and play the first chapter, I think it all falls into place and it makes sense in its own world. The dialogue's good and things like this, and I'm actually quite impressed with it. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. So maybe I'll do a full review at the end of it. I don't know yet. I'm not sure if I will do those kind of things. I'm not sure because it might take me a while to complete it. And by which point, is anyone interested about the full review? But because it's a new game this week, I thought it was an interesting one just to give a bit of a brief overview of what the game's about, and hopefully that's made sense. I'll probably put some background thing going on so you can see some footage of me playing the first hour in some way, shape, or form. And well, check out my playthroughs, as I say, if you want to see more. But I think it seems a good game. I recommend giving it a try. But as I say, not played the full game. Maybe my mind will change. But so far, I think it seems to be pretty good and pretty well written, albeit fantastical, but it all makes sense in its own world. With good dialogue, good voice acting, an interesting concept. It's a visual novel. It's not going to, you're not jumping around platforming, shooting things. But as far as visual novel goes, it seems quite easy to play, not too overwhelming, and quite interesting enough, with enough breakup of me doing things and changing about the place that it's actually recommended and interesting one to play. And not, I don't think over the top, not too much text, and balanced out, I think, quite well. Alright guys, so enjoyed that one. Maybe I'll see you in the comments of my playthroughs, and take care. See you next time.